Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Estonia's Digital Identity Interview. My name is Ravy Por, and I'm the Executive Director in Artificial Intelligence and Emerging Technologies at KPMG and founder of Héros de chez nous, a digital literacy nonprofit. Today, we have a very special guest with us. Today, we have Mr. Rene Tammist. Hello, Mr. Tammist.
Pleasure. Hello.
Do I call you Mr. Tammist or Rene?
Rene is better.
Thank you. We're very happy to receive you, and we know that the time zone is different, so thank you for being here with us. Welcome to the FERA, le Forum économique de la relève d'affaires du regroupement des jeunes chambres de commerce du Québec. A few words on you before we deep dive into the subject. So Rene Tammist graduated from Tartu University in 2001 with a bachelor degree in public administrations and holds a master degree from the University of Manchester in public policy and administration. From 2012 to 2018, he served as a board member of the Administrative Board of the European Union Agency for the Cooperation and Energy Regulators. Mr. Tammist had previously worked as a policy advisor to the Socialists and Democrats group at the European Parliament Industry, Research and Energy Committee, covering, among other topics, information technology and telecommunication, and as an executive director of the Estonian Renewable Energy Association. If I may jump in the subject with you. So digital identity, for many reasons, it has been a subject that is very trending in Quebec province. So Rene, how would you define digital identity?
Well, it's an identity that the users or the citizens in Estonian case can use to authenticate themselves and to sign and use different e-government services. And in Estonian case, the digital identity has been used or applied for all the citizens with 99% of coverage after the age of 18. So it's the compulsory model for all our citizens for almost 2 decades now.
So digital identity was first deployed in Estonia in early 2000 when it wasn't really a necessity. Could you share with us the genesis of digital ID in Estonia, please?
Yes, indeed. Estonia has been one of the first countries to adopt digital identity. And as such, there were some perhaps difficulties at the beginning for us to create our own system. But over time, we started to see the benefits, and people in general started to appreciate it. So, as already mentioned, with the digital ID, one can authenticate oneself and then sign everything digitally in a fully legally valid manner, from government tax to businesses contracts. To any applications to state by the citizens. And digital ID has made it possible to move transactions with citizens and businesses entirely online. At no point, no paper has to be presented or issued. So we use digital ID state-issued ID cards, but also mobile ID and some private sector solutions called smart ID. And they are all linked to people's unique identifier, personal code, which forms the core of digital identity. And just to bring an example, just by signing documents digitally each year, we save roughly 2% of the GDP So that's the value that this just signing the documents gives to our economy.
So one of the main questions when you talked about digital ID, and maybe because I'm a data scientist at heart, for me is when I hear digital identity, I hear security and data security. Could you explain to us how was the data transferred and shared between different platforms? And did you use or will you use biometrics data?
Indeed, trust is one of the key elements how to build up secure digital society, and also that people actually start to use the services and start to trust the system. So I think that's one of the main lessons that has to be beared in mind when countries are designing such similar systems, that trust is really essential. Trust in terms of prioritizing cybersecurity, which is really instrumental, and we can discuss it later if you like, but also trust in strong data and privacy protections have to be in place, just in order that people can trust the government, their data. For example, even if we share the data with a platform which is connecting different e-government services throughout the entire government, it does not mean that we do it hastily. So an agency has to have a legal right to know, or people's consent to access that data the other agencies hold. And the fundamental principle in Estonia is that people always own their data and should be able to control how it is used. So for instance, I can anytime log into my personal access to the government system and check who has viewed my data. And if I see that there's been a breach or I have questions why this person has viewed my data, I can raise a question about this. And the other, I think, important element is how the services are connected. I mentioned already there's a platform. So we don't have a centralized databases where data is being held, because this is creating significant risks. So instead, we have a decentralized way of storing the data. And there's a platform called X-Road, and this is where Estonia and Canada also cooperate. So which works like a open source highway for data traffic. And it doesn't, as I already mentioned, it doesn't have a master database or centralized database. All information is held in a distributed way, but it can be exchanged instantly upon request. And this is 24/7. So that's how our services are operating.
And what about the biometrics? Is it used in digital ID?
It is not used currently, but Estonia is also planning to use biometric data instead of PIN codes, for instance, for ID cards. And facial and fingerprints images would be collected in the future. And this project was launched already a couple of years ago and should be realized in the end of this year.
Okay, interesting. And how does a province or a country like us would be able to implement digital ID and e-services like Estonia? And what would be the main challenges?
Well,
it's not an easy question.
It's not an easy question. I think I'm not in a position to lecture what Quebec or Canada should do, considering that Canada is one of the highest ranking countries in terms of the use of digital solutions, including in the government public services. But perhaps some thoughts what could be bear in mind based on the Estonian example. So whatever the reforms that are going to be taken in this remit, I think one lesson that we have learned is that there's a need for a strong political will and leadership. So it takes some political courage to do things differently and take risks by trying out new and unconventional solutions. So perhaps that's something that has to be beared in mind. Second, I think what is important is that what we have learned is that shared technological platforms make the transformation go quicker. So one example, of course, digital identity as such. So this is something that both the private and public sector can use, and that gives a certain advantage over many countries that have implemented such systems only partially. So what we would recommend, or what we see from our own experience, is that it creates unique advantage if you introduce it population-wide as a compulsory means. We see that over the years the use of electronic ID has rapidly increased across the different age segments. So I think that is important, and of course what I already mentioned is trust. So priority to cybersecurity and also strong data and privacy protection. And maybe fourth point is that it's not all about the cool IT solutions, but it's a lot to do also with regulation and legislation, building right institutions and putting in place right regulative framework. So this is often being forgotten, that you have to also redesign your institutions when launching such programs.
Rene, you talked about trust and talking about the people, the citizen. How was change management when digital ID was implemented in Estonia?
Well, I think we have to start from back in the early 1990s when Estonia regained its independence. There was, I think, lots of willingness to see the transformation and to succeed. And when the entire concept of taking up new novel digital solutions emerged amongst the government and private sector and society groups, it was still mid 1990s, and at the beginning, I think there was no such grand vision. So we should reach to this end to with all the e-government services by that and that date. But it was more like an understanding or hunch that this is the direction where we should go. And already in mid-1990s, the first sort of grant program was created called Tiger Leap, which included both the rollout of infrastructure in terms of internet connectivity, PCs, and also the mass education programs for the introducing basic IT skills to the wider population. So large numbers of people actually went through these education programs, which were free, and also teaching the teachers, librarians, in order to assist people who were at that time going to the libraries or schools or universities to use computers, but also putting in place the curricula in the schools so that to teach youngsters the ICT skills. So from there on, I think that there was a readiness to adopt these new technologies, and first services started to emerge in the beginning of 2000s, including in 2002 digital identity. It took some time, I think, before it was widely adopted, but the more services there were available, the more people started to appreciate it. So today there's more than 3,000 services available, and except for getting married or divorced, there's literally nothing that you can't do online. And then people really appreciate the convenience, especially now when we have this COVID crisis.
So you said it took some time. How much time did it took?
Well, I think it was in correlation very much in the way the new services started to emerge. And of course, it took some time. It took a couple of years before there were some really large-scale services available that people started to use. So first of the services was tax declarations, and people really like the convenience of declaring the taxes in Estonia. It usually takes just 1 or 2 minutes, even for the companies. Because all the data is pre-filled, and since the end of last year, so just a few weeks now, there's a new solution, for instance, declaring the taxes, that when you give the access to your accountancy for the tax authority, then you don't have to fill in the tax reports anymore.
So about education on the subject, education on how to use the e-services. You've talked before about the program, and digital literacy is really important, and it's a challenge too. So would you say that if digital literacy is not taking into account, it could further the gap between ostracized citizens and certain classes who would have an easier understanding and access to technology? Let's say my parents are really good in their field, but in technology, it's not very the case. So would you say that a partnership between the private and the public sector is a necessity?
Yes, I certainly agree that it's good to have a strong partnership between the private and public sectors. That's the way actually in Estonia it has worked. So both sectors are actually quite interested in increasing the digital literacy of our people, and therefore have introduced such sort of education or training programs for the general public. So we have had several large-scale basic IT skills programs so that people would be able to benefit from the new services that are being offered. And of course, on top of that, we have training programs for different segments in the society, because it is also one of the key goals to increase the take-up of digital solutions in the traditional sectors.
Was it in class or virtual classes?
It's both in class and virtual classes as well. But on top of that, of course, we have a very strong ICT curricula in the schools, programming, robotics, modern technologies are introduced to the children already from early childhood, already in the kindergartens. And also this continues throughout the entire school system. So Estonia is one of the highest ranking countries in terms of science and mathematics skills. When you look the OECD regular surveys, so-called PISA surveys that are conducted every 3 years. And also the fact that in Estonia twice as many students enrolled to ICT specialties than on average in developed countries demonstrates the high take-up of and the success of our education system in introducing these skills widely.
I heard about a concept in Estonia about e-citizens that could go electronically in the country to go to schools or anything like that. Could you explain a little bit more about the concept?
Yes, so indeed, what we are offering is to have to gain the access to our government services via the e-residence program. So it means that you will apply to e-residency. It doesn't mean that you become a citizen or resident, but you can use the services such as any citizen in Estonia can use, and establish a company in Estonia and do the business within the EU. So I think that's quite convenient. And today I think we have roughly 75,000 e-residents who have established around 10,000 companies in Estonia, and they are creating quite a significant value. So indeed, this has been quite successful, and people outside of Estonia also appreciate the ease of doing business, especially when it comes to e-residency.
Earlier, you said that there was a lot of e-services. Was there a booming of new entrepreneurs that were developed because of the e-services in e-Estonia?
Indeed, the way our system has been developed is that our government departments don't have large ICT teams. So the way it works is that the companies develop these services, and this was right from the very beginning. And based on that, they also develop the capabilities and start to export these services outside of Estonia. And at the moment, our ICT sector is contributing 14% to our exports, and is forming part of the economy in a quite a large proportion, already 7%. And on top of that, we have a very vibrant startup ecosystem built by the same people who started their work in ICT sector, and some international comparisons call the Estonian ecosystem the most advanced one, or the best for the founders in the global comparisons. And then definitely in terms of per capita startups established or unicorns per capita, we are ranking as #1 globally. But this is not the entire ambition that we have. The sector has set the goal that in 10 years, the ICT sector, together with the startups, should form 30% of our economy. So there's lots of ambition and lots of knowledge sharing and helping each other amongst entrepreneurs. So this has really created a very vibrant economy in Estonia in this sector.
One of the questions that I had is, since there was a lot of data and it's decentralized and some of them are open, have you seen a boom in artificial intelligence and emerging technologies, whether it's in the education or in the startups?
Yes, indeed. This is one of the focuses of our startups in Estonia. So there's really lots of new startups emerging in the remit of AI, and it's really exciting to see how it's been developing over the last few years. But also our public sector is focusing a lot in taking up the AI in the public services. There are almost 100 services that are today being offered with the help of AI, and the number of services has been growing over the last 2 years significantly. So one of the focuses that our strategy in terms of implementing AI in Estonia has been in introducing the AI in the public services domain, and rightly so. I think this is something that perhaps is different with many other countries who have adopted similar strategies. Very often countries have selected a few sectors where they focus, but Estonia has not done so. For the first 2 years since adopting the strategy, we are encouraging the take-up of AI in different sectors in the government.
So in resume, one of the key success or some key success that you shared with us for implementing digital ID is a strong leadership for the digital ID partnerships with the private and public sector. You said trust is really important. Other main keys you want to share?
I think that's really important that you already mentioned. Perhaps I would again point out shared technological platforms. This is, I think, important in order to reap the benefits of the transformation. Also that one shouldn't forget about legal framework and regulation. Right institutions are also really key. So very often this is forgotten, and later when these new novel technologies are introduced, and there's lots of questions why they are not being taken up, or why there's so many problems. So I think this is also a key. Maybe one thing to add is technological experimentation. Indeed, the government can also be the one that could experiment with different novel solutions. For example, in 2012, Estonia became early adopters of blockchain technologies, even before the word blockchain emerged. By adopting timestamping and KSI blockchain for data integrity of our key databases. So with the adoption of these new novel technologies, sometimes you could fail, but also sometimes you succeed, and people do appreciate the mindset of experimentation and using of these new solutions. When I was a minister, also what I tried to do is to introduce the concept of startup in the public sector, so that instead of lengthy development of different programs, some rigid and long procedures, we rather would introduce for the consumers, for the citizens, first versions of the solution and see what are the reactions, and from there to improve our proof of concepts, and then start the development. So and what we have done also is for instance various experimentations with trying to bring in different companies to develop in the hackathons novel solutions to some problems that government agencies have raised, and I think these have also worked quite well.
You said blockchain earlier. I was wondering if blockchain was a success factor in implementing digital ID.
I wouldn't say so, because well, at the beginning when the digital ID was used, there was no blockchain element involved, but nevertheless it was secure and enabled us to start with online voting already in 2005. But later on, I think we have, as a government, used more and more blockchain technologies.
And my last question for you, Rene, what advice would you give to our young professionals and entrepreneurs who are interested in digital identity, that most of us, we don't have the experience that you have?
Well, I think there are now from variety of examples, possibilities to use the experiences from implementing these solutions, either be it with biometric data or partial implementation of digital identity. But we are happy to share our knowledge we have gained in Estonia. There are hundreds of delegations who are visiting Estonia and want to learn from our experience. So we are happy to share the knowledge that we have acquired over the years, and then so are the companies who have built these systems. So please feel free and to visit Estonia and learn from our
experience. Is it an invitation for us?
This is an invitation indeed.
Thank you very much for your time, Rene Tammist. It was amazing sharing the advices, sharing your experience. It was Rene Tammist and Ravy Por pour le Forum économique de la relève d'affaires de la RJCCQ. Merci à tous.
Merci bien.
Merci.